I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Jim Hermann is the district manager here at Hawkeye. He has a diverse background that includes positions such as senior plant manager in Des Moines, manager Minneapolis St. Paul Bulk Mail Center, field industrial engineer, delivery programs manager, operations program support manager, and post office operations manager. I'm sure he's going to tell us everything that's going on the most recent announcement, and he's just tickled to death to answer questions. He doesn't know that, but I'm sure he will. Please welcome Jim Hermann.
First of all, Larry, thanks for inviting me and everybody. It's nice to see people that some of you haven't seen for, geez, Steve, has it been 6 or 7 years now?
Long time.
It's been a long time. Well, it hasn't been quite that long for you, but it's nice to see people from Mid-America. I spent a lot of my postal career there, and then up to Northland for a little bit, which I know is not represented, and then down here to Iowa. But always in the Midwest. I like the Midwest. Born and raised here. And I was glad when Larry invited me to speak to you for a little bit. As far as speeches go, I have a canned speech. They always write them for us, and I hate to use it. So what you'll see is I'll sort of ad-lib it as I go, and we'll see how it goes. And then hopefully I'll try and answer any questions you have at the end of the talk. Okay. You know, the scary thing is I asked Larry, does he know what a QR code is? How many of you know what a QR code is? They all do, look at that, don't they? Yeah. So, but, no. Once again, thanks for inviting me, and I think it's pretty easy. Everybody knows the Postal Service is going through some pretty major changes right now. And they're all being precipitated by the fact that the mailing industry, whether it's us mailing as individuals or mailers at larger, are changing how they mail and what they mail. In about 2006, we peaked as a company as far as the volume of mail we worked. At that time, we were at 98 billion pieces of first-class mail. Last year, we were down to 74 billion. We lost essentially 25% of our money, first-class revenue. At the same time, what was over 100 billion piece industry as far as standard has now dropped to just about 80 billion. So we lost 20% of that. So we've seen a lot of the revenue go away, and with it comes change. The reason it goes away, there's a couple of things. We all know a lot of it has to do with these lovely things. As technology is advanced, more of us use them to pay our bills. People use the computer to send most of your bills these days, unless you're somebody like me that refuses to take them on email. If they have to mail them to me, I'll pay by mail. A lot of our electronic a lot of our mails went by electronic diversion. The economy made the standard mail, or the advertising mail, really drop because of the recession. So we've seen those go down. What they expect in the future is not a lot better as far as the picture goes. What they're talking about on first-class mail is that we will continue to see a decline from that 98 billion point down to about 39 billion a year by year 2016. So about 4 more years out, we will have lost 60% of our first-class mail. And the first-class mail volume is what really pays for most of the Postal Service. That's where most of the profit came from. That's how we paid for the buildings, the post offices, the entire, essentially, the country. That's what first-class was doing. Advertising mail is very much of a competitive product, because if you're an advertiser, you have to decide how you want to advertise to your customers. The cheapest way to do it is electronic. Okay, it's to use email, it's to use the internet. It's also the least effective. The Postal Service has a very good return, but when I talk to mailers, what they tell me is it's very price sensitive. If the return stays where it's at and we raise our rates, all of a sudden radio, TV become more cost effective. They'll have a higher rate, but their cost right now is so much more that if we stay at a reasonable rate, they use us. If our rates go up, we would see the standard mail even continue to decline. So we have to be careful what we do with our rates, or else we're going to see a continued decline as far as the volume of mail. Now, a couple of years ago, 2010, we had a little change come on. We changed our PMG. Pat Donahue came in as our PMG, and it was sort of matched up. There was a guy named Jack Welch, who was CEO of GE, that said, change before you have to. And one of the things that Mr. Donahue did was he came out with change on 4 fronts. He said, these were the 4 things we were going to focus on as a company. First one was going to be strengthen the business-to-consumer channel. Second was improve customer experience. Third was grow package delivery. And the fourth one was become leaner, faster, smarter as an organization. And I'd like to give you a little update on each of those 4, what we've been doing, where we're at on those. And we'll start with strengthening the business-to-consumer channel. During the last National Postal Forum, they did a little survey. And they asked customers who received mail, how valuable do you believe the mail that comes in your mailbox is to you? 2 out of 3 people said it was very valuable. They then turned it to businesses and said, businesses, how valuable do you think the people think your mail is? Only 1 out of 3 said that they thought it was valuable. So that's quite a bit of a disconnect, because the people that we want to see mail, businesses, don't really realize how valuable our consumers feel that their mail is. So we've come up with a couple ways to try and strengthen that business to consumer and make them to where they can either try us or that they get more information from it. From a trying us standpoint, about a year ago we came out with what was called EDDM. Is everybody familiar with what that is? Even the old retirees, Jim, you know what EDDM is? Okay. EDDM is every door direct mail. It is a very simple way for a mailer to saturate a single route, single zip code, and say, I want to mail this mail. It's about 15 cents a piece. So for about $75 or so, you can mail a whole route. It has been very, very successful. We've had, primarily, a lot of the people that use it are like restaurants, pizza places. We had a place out in Dubuque that used it, and they saw a 25% jump in their sales just off that one meal. So that was going so well that we actually started doing advertising. You see it out on the TV now. You'll see the Postal Service advertise EDDM. I hope you've seen those ones. The one where the guy has his wife dressed up as a chicken out there trying to drive business. That's the EDDM. Okay, that's one of the ways we're trying to make businesses realize what value we can offer them from an advertising standpoint. The other thing we're trying to do for businesses is to provide them more value in their mail. The IMV, which is now replacing Postnet, is allowing them to see the service and see the mail as it transfers from one plant to the next, all the way through to the delivery operation. And then the third thing we're doing this summer, we did a little test of it last year, and we're increasing it this year, is these little QR codes. We're doing a sale where a mailer can put a QR code on their mail piece, but the QR code has to take them, and if you've ever tried one on your smartphone, QR code will take you to their website, straight to it. You can get information about the company, the product you're looking at. So we're saying mailers, put a QR code on your mail piece. Then when you get it into the person's home, they'll click on it with their smartphone, and it goes straight to their website. And we're trying to make it to where we are the way that mailers drive activity to their websites. And in order for it to qualify for the sale, not only did it have to go to their website, but you actually had to go to a place where they could purchase something. So the future, part of the future for the Postal Service would be an advertiser says, I'm going to advertise, I use a QR code, it drives them to their website, they order something online, and of course they mail it back using priority mail back to the customer. So that's how we're trying to make it to where businesses want to use us more, is add more value to them. The second part is to try and improve the customer experience. All of us, no matter where we shop there more often if we feel good about that company. We go there, they treat us right, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a store, whatever it is, they treat us right when we go back. In Hawkeye, one of the things we push the hardest is ECC, the Electronic Customer Connect. If a customer has said, we want to hear from you, we have a concern, we try and answer that within 24 hours, and you've hit my radar screen at 48. By giving that type of a quick turnaround to our customers, what we see is a direct correlation to CSM scores, or the Customer Satisfaction Measurement System. And with that, we're normally a top 10 district, and we think a lot of it is Customers, when they do have a concern or an issue, they raise it to us, we turn around very quickly with them and get back to them on and try to resolve their issue. So that's improving the customer experience. Third thing for Pat Donahue was grow the package business. Probably the most successful advertising campaign we've ever had was Al, our letter carrier, and If It Fits, It Ships. The package business is growing with or without us. But because of that, with If It Fits, It Ships, we actually are growing packages faster than the industry as a whole. We are taking market share away from UPS, away from FedEx, and growing that package business because it is so simple to mail with Postal Service now with the If It Fits, It Ships. Not only does it work, did we have the original box, now we've got 4 or 5 different sizes for our customers to choose from. And this year, we're starting to roll it out for express mail too. So you can use express mail shipping If It Fits, It Ships for that. It's set rate, you know what it's going to be, makes it very simple. So we're seeing that grow. Tied to that, with anything with the package business and the internet, is the return business. The return business is where we see that there's a lot of potential growth, is because a lot of people, when they buy online, they're not quite sure how that blue looks. Is it this color blue? Is it a darker blue? What color blue is it? So they'll order 2 or 3 shirts or 2 or 3 of one item. Maybe they'll order a medium and a large and an extra large to find which size it is. And then they have to return what they don't keep. Well, that being said, these companies now need a way to get that back. So we are doing a lot with return parcels. In fact, last week I met with Bob Maurer, if you're familiar with them, sort of an upscale department store, trying to get their business. They're making a decision this week to see which company they're going to use for their parcel returns. So we see that as a place that we can grow as a company. Finally, the last part of the 4 bulletins was to become a leaner, faster, smarter company, and that's what you see a lot in the news these days. How do we adjust the business to what people are using us for today? And there's a couple of things going on. We have shrunk a lot of plants over the last few years. A lot of places, maybe not quite so much what somebody here would consider a plant, but a processing facility. We were reduced over 200 before any of this started with all the conversation. Last year, Hawkeye, we eliminated the Decorah plant. It went into Waterloo. Fort Dodge plant was AMP'd into Des Moines, and Sioux City was up to Sioux Falls. And in fact, the Sioux City one has been so successful from a service standpoint, there was actually part of that SCF that scored 100% for the whole quarter on our service mission. So it's working well if you do it right. We currently have a couple more that are being looked at that are part of the announcement that came out today, that being Creston and Carroll. They're very small operations. But that's part of what we're doing, to say, how do we adjust to a situation where we've lost 25% of the volume of mail we used to work. So 25% of it's gone, you don't need 700 in some places processing. Second thing is, and you've heard a lot about this, was the idea of post office closures. Do we still need 32,000 post offices across the country? Congress apparently thinks we do. So we've taken the different approach that says we'll keep the post offices, we will reduce the work hours to match to what the customers are saying they want. So if a place only has 5 customers a day, you don't stay open 8 hours for 5 customers. So we are looking at those changes. That was announced last week. We expect to see a lot of the information tied to that probably the end of next week is what I'm hearing right now. As far as what will be the main offices, who will be the sort of the subordinate type offices that are only open 2, 4, or 6 hours, and how will they report through the structure. So a lot of that's just starting to be formed now. We'll see a lot more of that coming out, I'm sure, over the next couple of months. And a lot of the change we hope to have done by the end of summer, then we'll stop change and not do any of it during the political election and start back up again next February. At this time, I would open up to any questions that you might have directed towards me, maybe as a company as a whole. I'll at least answer it from a Hawkeye perspective, and probably the western area too. So, questions from the floor? Yeah.
Edmund Smith, President Grant, when we go to Congress, sometimes we think about representatives and talk to us about the consistency and the get integrity of the information that goes to the right time. When we make a decision to adjust the post office, or adjust hours, do we do an internal, efficiency report to see how well our projected numbers match up with reality? And with that information, pass on to, I guess, lower level management, if you need more.
As far as how do we audit ourselves when we make a big change, is that pretty fair? First of all, the big changes we've done so far would mainly be tied to, I guess there'd be two of them. The first one would be A&P studies. And with an A&P study or area mail processing where they consolidate one plant or part of a plant into another, there's two things. First of all, the actual study process, the model that is used, has been went through by the OIG and, for lack of a better term, blessed that this makes sense, you are looking at the right things. Once you've implemented one, you do an after implementation study that's 6 months later. And I think there's one at 1 year. We're currently doing the 6-month reviews right now for Sioux City, Fort Dodge, and Decorah. So they actually go back and ask us, did you save the money that you committed to? Did you maintain the levels of service to the point that you said you would? And we go through that process. So there are checks and balances that say, first of all, was it a good study? Did the numbers make sense? And I know I read something about some of the things up in Vermont or somewhere where the data didn't make sense when somebody looked at it. But the model itself, if you follow the model that is rolled out to you, it pretty much fills in the blanks for you. So you use that as a starting point, so it's very defensible. And then afterwards, you have to document, did you save the money you said you were going to? Work hours and maintain the service. So there are those checks and balances on that. They don't have the same level of checks and balances if you were doing what's called a DUO, delivery unit optimization. That one I haven't seen the same type model. Every district sort of did the review on their own. A number of them were done in Hawkeye here before I switched from the plant manager job to the district manager. I know how I'm looking at it right now. I get the gaining and losing inputs in the room or postmasters, and they have to make that commitment that yes, I can operate at this level of work hours. Before I sign it, I can maintain a box uptime at this time. We're going to do this. This is the roll route I'm going to have to drop on, because I've seen where we've struggled on some of the ones that we've already implemented. So from learning from that, I've changed how we do it in Hawkeye just to make sure that any future ones have maybe an engineer scrutiny on them going in that says, I believe we're going to make sense, we're going to make money, and it's the right business decision. As I've told any of the inputs, some of them have said, well, I want to do this. I think long-term it's going to help us, but we lose money the first year. My answer to that is we're in a company right now that's struggling financially. If I'm not willing to stand up in front of a group of people or a group of Congress people and say this was the right business decision financially, I don't sign it. So that's where I'm at on the two ways. Other questions?
Incentives, we've seen the postmaster, they're up for an incentive right now, and we're all kind of wondering with plants maybe being pulled back in a little bit, not quite as many plants, but there's going to be some impact. Anything on the horizon for incentives?
As far as the incentives go, like you said, there is one tied to the postmasters for any EAS postmaster. That one's went out. As far as the plants go, we closed 3 of them last year, and I had the prerogative to say I wanted what was called a site-specific VERA, which was I would allow people to retire from that plant, not the whole district, just that geography of where we were reducing the jobs. There was no incentive with that. So that's how they went last year, and they only pertained to craft because I had lots of EAS vacancies. I didn't need EAS employees leaving the Postal Service. So my speculation would be, if I was making the decision at least, first of all, you only incent people to leave if you have too many that you have a reason that you need to have them gone. Right now, from an EAS standpoint, in the plants, at least in the Hawkeye district, they are all short-staffed. So if there was one going away, either the offices right around them would have more than enough jobs for those supervisors. So I wouldn't really ask for one, okay? The 2 places being studied, Creston and Carroll, neither of them have an EAS impact. So at this time, I would say neither of them should expect to see a VERA. I have not heard of anything at the national level other than postmasters. far as a Vera or even the incentive.
Has no questions? Everybody understands everything about what's going on?
This is the easiest group I've had to talk to. I can't do VOE surveys this easy. Yeah,
Rob, with Branch 36, you had talked a little bit about the duos and the offices that have struggled in the implementation. Have there been any of them reversed?
As far as reversed in Hawkeye, I don't know about nationwide. Hawkeye, there was one that I reversed, okay? And what happened was, we were looking at, the town was Norwalk, it's just south of Des Moines here, and bringing it into the South Des Moines station. When it was first planned, it would have fit. It's only about 7 or 8 miles away, even distance-wise, it would have worked. Between the time it was first studied and the implementation date, we had the challenge to close non-retail stations. We moved a station in there and moved 2 other small offices. And by the time Norwalk got in there, it was so crowded that, in my opinion, it was unsafe for our employees. The aisles were too narrow, there were issues that way. So the last one in, and also was the right one from a size perspective, was Norwalk. And we said, let's put Norwalk back. So about a month after it happened, we tried a number of different layouts, and nothing worked. We said Norwalk should go back to Norwalk, and that's what we did. Yeah.
Ed Newman, Nebraska 930, State Branch President. Just out of curiosity, I see that we're going to go ahead and move on with our consolidations, and we're doing those type of things. And I've also watched the bill that came through the Senate in 1789, and it had some references in there about closing, doing what they said they would do, which is to help the rural post offices. And my question here is, what happens when we get to the other end and Congress does, the House does their thing, and they finally get together and put a bill, and we've already gone down this road, and Congress says, no, we didn't want you to do that. What are we going to do then? And you know it's coming.
Well, actually, I don't know it's coming because I'm not convinced Congress can actually come up with a bill that they'll also. We had very aggressive plans prior to the Congress and prior to the moratorium. Okay? And I think we all know that as far as how many plants would close, the number of post offices that would be impacted. And what we did was we said, take a look at what Congress is leaning towards. What is the Senate passing? And what they were passing was keep small offices, but they weren't saying that they have to stay open the same number of hours. So we tried to take what they were leaning towards. They didn't say don't close plants, they said don't change service standards and eliminate overnight. So you could see where they were leaning in when we said, okay, what can we do within the constraints of what we're seeing coming out of the Senate? That's why you saw at least the first phase of the plant closures are all tied to the fact that you must be able to maintain overnight within that plant. So anything that would be AMP'd into Des Moines has to be able to get into Des Moines and get back out to that office for overnight service. So we maintain the overnight service that Congress was, the Senate at least, was saying, and yet still try and capture some of the efficiency gains and some of the financial issues that we have to do as a company. Likewise with the post offices, we could see that the issue was don't close the post office, we want a presence. So we said, what can we do? Well, let's look at what the true workload is. If the office doesn't have 2 hours of workload, let's only open for 2 hours. If it has a little over 2 but not 4, let's open for 4. So we did adjustments to our plan that at least would be consistent with what has been passed so far through the Senate. Yes.
Juan Macias, Branch 205 in Wichita, Kansas. I know you can only speak for Hawkeye, but you guys have a kind of a process that, you mentioned something about VOE surveys. Do you guys have a process that you roll the information down to the lowest level results?
As far as the VOE surveys, the best process I've ever seen was in Northland. When I was up there, they actually pushed it down to the unit level, to the employees. And if you were a manager in Northland, you actually had action plans based off that. And I think you see it based off their scores. I have not implemented that in Hawkeye. I probably should, because I don't think we do enough with ours. What I do with it, as far as a VOE survey, I did it when I was up there, and I've done it since I've been in Hawkeye, is I conduct my own, especially with EAS. A lot of times, as a district manager, not all the EAS employees, even at the district, get a chance to talk to me on a regular basis. So they know whenever their DOE survey is, we just sort of take an hour or whatever time, and I try, just like this group, answer any and all questions that they have. But I would tell you, I don't think I've done enough yet with the DOE survey to take the information that's provided to me. I might hit a couple of the big points, but I don't do enough with it down to the unit level. And probably the best learning I saw on that was out of Northland.
That's probably almost a nationally wide problem, because down at the lower level, they don't know why they're even doing it.
Yeah, the thing Northland did well, and Hawkeye's done some of it, is they'll actually design videos sort of from what they learned off the last one and do a video that is then shared throughout the entire district. And you've probably seen some of those before, and we try and tie that to what we were seeing in the DOE survey. But I know from seeing Northland, there's more we could do with it, and I'm sure nationwide it's the same story.
William Butterfield, Ranch 586, Waterloo, Iowa. Are we going to continue doing duos at this point? Are there some planned in the future?
As far as for the future, and you're talking Hawkeye?
Correct.
Right, okay. Duos for Hawkeye, there's about 25 of them that we're currently studying. And the ones that were being studied right now were mainly tied to the idea that Post Office X was on the list, the earlier list to close. And if I was going to move it into here and it was delivered by a rural route, should I move the whole operation to a little larger office at the same time so I don't impact customers twice? So there are about 25 we were looking at. At this time, I have approved none of them. Okay. Now, of course, with the latest announcement, that would have changed it anyway. But the reason I had was, in a lot of cases, it wasn't financially the right decision. And as I said, I'm not going to make a decision right now to spend $10,000 a year more because somebody wants it in one office versus the other. If I make it work, I need to do what's in the best business decision for the company right now. So as of right now, there are none approved, ready to go.
Jim, on a comical question real quick from your staff at Hawkeye District. I didn't get a chance to see the FXC stories this morning. Have you seen them yet, sir? And if so, are we still ahead of Mid-America?
Yes and no. Yes, I saw them, and we tanked our third day in a row, and it allowed Mid-America to sneak past us by about 100. For today. Actually, both of us better watch out, because the district that was well behind us was Northland, and they're now 1/100th behind. It's 96, 41, 40, and 39 now. And we were both well ahead of Northland up until about a month ago, so we better get on our game a little bit.
Additional questions? Well, guys, you got a district manager. Jim is probably one of the most open ones of the four that I deal with on a regular basis. He's absolutely willing to give you all he's allowed to tell you, and has real good, fair opinions, as you can tell by some of the things he's spoken today. So this is a good place to get a nice open response.
Well, Ed, you look back there like you were going to disagree with him on that part of it, huh? Yeah, Ed.
Ed Smith, gave me being an open manager, being able to communicate well with your supervisor and managers. What can lower-level supervisors do to best support upper-level management decisions at this time based on the circumstances?
I think that's probably the easiest question you're going to ask me, because I talked about it on our telecom today. We have a problem right now, we have a number of it as a company, and it's too easy for us to get distracted. We get distracted with our plants closing, or post offices being reduced, or are they closing, what's going to happen with Duo, what's going to happen with all this. But as a frontline supervisor, your job is the same as it was a month ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago. We collect, process, and deliver mail. And if we stay true to that part of it, and let some of the other people deal with that stuff that's sort of the messy stuff, but we stay true and collect, process, deliver mail, and do it efficiently, that's what we do. And from Linda's level all the way through mine, you have to stay focused on that part. When we get too busy looking at the other parts of the company, okay, how's the risk going to affect me or whatever, and if it gets to that level, then we deal with it. But right now, there's people worried about it, and they're not even on any list or any discussion. So let's focus on what we do as a company, collect, process, and deliver, and I think we'll be just fine.
There's been a kind of a trend, it looks like, in the Postal Service is in the process of identifying small post offices as stations rather than post offices. And thereby not requiring congressional approval to close it down. Is that a general trend of the Postal Service to circumvent congressional approval, or?
Okay, you got me on that one because I don't know of any post office that.
Hang on, I'm out of that.
Find out.
Wasn't there a requirement at the start of this by somebody who's sitting up here that says turn all these devices off? I heard that, okay. No, I'm not aware of anybody that's converting post offices to stations. Now, under the old rules, the approach to close a station or branch was different than it was to do a post office. And a lot of it was the appeal rights through the PRC was different, and a few other steps were different in the process. Last year, they changed that to where whether it's a station, a branch, a post office, they all go through the same discontinuous process. In fact, if you were a station or branch and you were looking to close, got caught by the moratorium and had followed the station and branch approach, they're now telling you be sure you follow the post office approach, not the station and branch. They are going to do all exactly the same as far as the culture. So that's my understanding. Your look on your face says I may not know this one right, so.
Well, I heard this like a year and a half ago, and it's something in the huge amount of information that's going out on these post offices. It implied, and I thought I saw it in actual writing, that a 2 or 4 or 6 hour post office really wasn't a post office. It was essentially a station, and therefore it would be a remote RMP, a remote managed post office.
Okay, now we're talking two different things. I wasn't answering your question. Okay. The 2, 4, and 6 hour remote managed post office, the 2 and 4, for everything that I've seen, will be managed by essentially a PMR, of what we know today. It'll be a non-career employee, 2 hours or 4 hours is what they'll be open. They will be managed or at least guided by a host post office. And all post offices that they'll either be a 2 hour, 1 or 4 hour non-career, a 6 hour which will act like a current EPM, which is a part-time career, and then every other post office will be 18s and above. So on the announcements that went out to the postmaster groups, there are to be approximately 4,500 level 15s and 16 post offices that will be upgraded to level 18. And we should be seeing that list, I'm assuming, by probably sometime the holiday week. But I guess, I don't know if you call that station or branch, but they are saying that's a remote managed post office. And so if I'm the host office, that PMR would essentially get their direction and guidance from me. I don't know whether that means I take their stamp stock. I don't know what all that exactly means yet. But that is as far as we've been explained so far.
Well, my concern was that once you become that, you no longer have a career person running it. Does that give them now the opportunity to close these without having to discuss it with Congress if they believe that they're just no longer viable?
I don't think that would apply. And the reason being is we're leaving them open based off what Congress has been arguing for. So the fact that we would say, okay, now you're a non-career 2 hour office, I'm going to just close you carte blanche. If we're going to do that, we might as well do it now. So I don't think that's going to change. How we staff it is not going to matter to Congress. They're going to see it as, I got my post office still open, I'm a post office, follow these guidelines before you close it. I know that's how they would perceive it. I haven't heard anything that would change it from our standpoint.
Virginia Price, branch 131. Let's reverse that. You have offices that were, say, a level 23 office, and because of colleges buying out property and things, is now, when they do the switch, it comes out as a level 21. But its attached facility is a 22. How are you all handling that when you got a postmaster in a level 21 building, but his subordinate manager is in a level 22? How are you handling it?
Okay, you hit me with an HR question. You have a
HR
very,
question.
okay, you have a very good HR manager, or actually the area manager of HR, Simon Story, coming in tomorrow. Could you hold that question and ask him? Because that's what I would have done, is if I had a 21 postmaster with a 22 station, I'd be calling Mr. Story and saying, what do I do now? I would have asked the same question, but I would have asked it to Mr. Story, and he'll be here tomorrow morning for you guys.
Maybe he'll answer because they don't get it.
Okay. And he'll be so glad it's Gateway and not
Simon will answer for you the proper process, and he'll say, if you want me to, I'll be glad to call, who the interim manager is?
Pam.
Oh, Pam will do, in St. Louis, get an answer for you. Simon, I have no problem with that, get her out of this area.
Sir, are all the rural routes that are in these 2, 4, and 6 offices, they're gonna be moved out and centralized somewhere?
That's a real good question, okay? Contrary to what most people might think, I have very little more information than anybody in this room. But that's been one of the questions I've thought about since the day they said, okay, we're gonna have 2, 4s, and 6s. And if you were gonna have 2 and 4 non-career postmasters, would you really want to have a career rural carrier in that office? No, you wouldn't, okay? So what I've been doing right now, because I don't know what all the offices are and who they will belong to as far as the main office, is we've been this week building what we would consider hopefully a comprehensive enough database that says, here's all the offices in Hawkeye, here's the 2, 4s, and 6s as currently projected, here's who have routes within those, here's who the head out or the intermediate is tied to that route, so that when I do see those rules, probably in the next week or 2 weeks, then we can adjust quickly on that. I think everybody will want to know answers fairly quickly. My gut feel would say if I'm a 2 or a 4, I probably don't have a rural route, but I can't tell you that for sure. That's just, I would think from a management standpoint, that's what I would want.
I'm from Lincoln Branch 64, and I'm a postmaster of 11, 13, and I'm supposed to go to a 4-hour office. What I see is we're having a hard time keeping PMRs right now. And what I see is a community that wants to keep their post office. They're going to want 2 hours in the morning, like at 9 or 10 in there, and 2 hours in the afternoon when they get home from work. Now, we're having a hard time keeping PMRs now, but it's a split shift of PMR from 2 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. I don't think it's going to happen.
First, you must be a minority. I don't think, as a postmaster here, you're probably one of the few that are here for that one. But as far as my understanding, and I never even considered that a 4-hour office could not be 4 consecutive hours. Okay? I assume if I'm a 4-hour office, I'm 8 to 12, I'm 9 to 1. That type of situation. I'm 1 to 5 in the afternoon. And that we are going to go out and do town hall meetings and try and get input from the community that says, what 4 hours work for you? And to be honest with you, I never even considered that anybody would think they would get a split job out of that. What I hope they'll do, and I don't have an answer, nobody's been able to tell me this, is I hope I can say, because like you, I think we're going to struggle to have enough PMRs. And that is, I'm hoping that we can say a PMR essentially bids a job, and I could bid this 2 hour in the morning and this 4 hour in the afternoon, and have one person do multiple offices, so long as the travel time is close enough. But I don't know if that's true or not. It's my speculation as I try to put it together. What I did tell HR this morning, I meet with them almost every morning, and that was identify everybody who doesn't have the PMR right now, solicit for them right now. Because I think 2 months from now, like you, we're going to be struggling for PMR. So we are trying to fill up all of our PMR slots and get going on that in anticipation of what might be happening in about August or so.
I guess when you say PMR, first of all, I think about a 1 day a week person, basically. So now PMR is going to be 5, 6 days a week, perhaps.
I don't know if we'll use the same term PMR, okay, but it will be similar to a PMR, but it's not a career position. And they will have the 5 to 6 day coverage. That'd be the 2 or 4 hours on that, It will be, it's not a one-day job anymore. It will be essentially it will be their office. It will be a non-career position starting out as well.
The postmasters that were supposedly impacted got telecom across the United States, 9,000 or so. They got told some information. I've been trying to get that information, I can't get it. I talked to Simon Story, he has a copy of it. Can you give us some idea of what they were told in there? Is it fair for you to do that? I know that there's, for instance, a lifespan of a currently occupied post office position of 27 months, something like that. Can you enlighten us?
Yeah, if you told me about it, I'd brought you the copy. Okay? Now, I don't think you did. If I brought a copy, I'd have read it to you, I wouldn't have given it to you. I think I had those telecoms at 15 minutes apart for about 4 hours straight that day, okay, because we have a number of them on that. But the issue is if you are an office that is targeted as a 2 or 4 hour office, or a 6 hour one, and you are the current city postmaster, and you are a 8-hour office today, 40 hours a week, you retain that level of service for that community, so long as you are there, up to, they said 27 months, essentially, 2 years. Okay, so that in 2014, any office that had not come vacant from now until that point, then would be in the RIF process for that postmaster, and then we would implement the 246. But in the time from now until then, that office would stay open at its current hours, there would be no change in the hours, so long as that person was still there. Is that consistent with what you heard? And I didn't bring it. Yes, sir.
James Pearson, Branch 131, St. Louis, Gateway. This is just a question. I don't know if it can happen or not. But you're saying a PMR, a non-career position, is going to be handling the actual post office now several days a week. Now, what if a retired postal employee or a retired federal employee is interested in that under contract? Is that possible?
That question I got hit with yesterday afternoon. Okay, and I'll tell you what I told them. I have not been told anything that allows it. I am aware that other government agencies have allowed retirees to come back on a up to 20-hour-a-week type basis, but I don't believe that's anywhere in the Postal Service at this time. Would they consider it? I don't know why they couldn't, but I'm not aware of it being in any rule as of right now. Another excellent question for Simon Story tomorrow, sort of an HR. And if he gives you a better answer than mine, send me the answer. But it's not on the FAQ part for headquarters yet.
Yes. With all the numbers that we are hearing about how much the Postal Service is losing on a daily basis, on a quarterly basis, in your opinion, are we doing enough right now to make our company solvent?
Wow. The money we're losing right now, and it's big money right now, it's $3.2 billion last quarter, so it's about, $1.25 billion. The biggest part of it is the pre-funding of the retiree health care. I mean, that's the driver. You'll see it, that until 2010 was closed, 2011 was really the first year operations. The people in this room, we lost money. Until then, we made money, but we kept going into debt because of that law of 2006, where we are pre-funding it. That law's not going away. And unfortunately, even the Senate, even though they deferred it a little bit, they didn't take it off the books. And I don't believe the money's sitting anywhere where they can give it back to us. Right? Nobody believes they've got it in the back pocket, right? Okay. So we have to make decisions on what we know. And what we know is we're losing money. So we made very big decisions, closing half our plants, eliminating overnight service. If we don't go to 6 to 5 days, we don't go that, we won't offset that loss we've got right Okay, they can give us the 11 billion back that we've overfunded first, our retirement system, not healthcare, but the overfunded. And I love it because they call it a bailout. When I meet with employees, I ask them, did you get your bailout this year, Jim? You didn't get a bailout this year? Will, did you get a bailout this year? Am I the only one in the room who got a bailout this year? Did you guys get, nobody else got a bailout? Yeah, he got a bailout, okay. When I overpay the federal government with taxes, they pay me back what I overpaid them, right? That's not a bailout. I didn't get a bailout this year. I overpaid, they paid me back. Paying back what we've overpaid into our retirement system at first is not a bailout. And I don't know how to convince the press or our Congress people to understand it's not a bailout. They like the word. We're not getting a bailout. We overpaid. They're giving the money back to us. Now, of course, I'm sure we'll see a very hefty interest that we'll get with that. Right, okay. No interest. They borrowed the money for free. But no, that's not a bailout, okay? And so are we doing enough? Right now, nothing that's passed will get us solved again. The plan we have is set to do very radical changes, 6 to 5, eliminate half the plants, close post offices, because think about this, we're now going to have an extra 4,000 or 5,000 post offices that even though we may not pay hourly rate to, I'm still renting a building. I'm still heating it. I'm still paying electricity. So I'm taking maybe quarters on the dollar of what I should have saved by doing this. But being the government, quasi-government agency we are, we have to work within their restrictions. We are doing everything we can right now. But to be honest with you, we are not solving a problem yet. We are trying to extend our life right now.
Can you see us going full circle again? Can you see us going back to where you took the postmaster back on the cabinet and you become an entity? I mean, you have to look at the history of the Postal Service. And the Postal Service was initially founded by our forefathers to combine the country together through communication. And the rural areas are the biggest concern about that. And the way we look at it right now, the longer we try to be a single entity and become a business, we'll never succeed. Unless you absolutely, and then you're going to really basically, it's kind of like UPS, who, we deliver the last mile for them. They're solved because they're not delivering that last mile to the rural areas. But somebody has to.
Well, the question you've got to ask the same customers who are saying, okay, this is what your mission is and you have to provide service to rural areas is, okay, put us back under Congress. And how do you think they're going to pay for the money they don't want to spend, that they want to spend by keeping you all over? Do you want your taxes to go up to pay for this? You want to say we are buying the country thick or thin, 6 days a week. Shoot, some of you have probably been around when we deliver mail twice a day. Okay? You people. So if you're saying don't change, don't do anything, spend the money that way, how much do you want to pay in taxes? Because that's how it's going to do, okay? We've been since 71 essentially, we pay our own way. It's a great part of the company. Okay, we get some of the benefits of being under government. We got some very big disadvantages of it too. But we pay our own way. We would not have debt today without that law of 2006. We were out of debt. We would still be out of debt, or at least real close, okay? So, for the people that argue that you have a mission, you must do this, the question's real simple. How do you want to pay for it? There's only 2 ways to do it. They either raise taxes or they cut our pay. It's one of the few times I vote to raise taxes.
So I dare ask an opinion, Jim? No. About your personal
Who are you and what branch are you from?
I'm Paul Pickett from Hawkeye District.
Oh, I knew he's familiar.
Just your personal opinion, if you don't want a response, that's fine. What's your personal opinion about the Postal Service starting their own personal medical health plan for their employees? Talk about spending money.
Wow, that's an interesting one. This is my personal opinion. Nobody's writing it down. Nobody's recording it. Talk right into this.
You got the recorder.
Okay. First of all, I would have to claim that I'm not smart enough to give you a true opinion. I'll tell you some of the things I think about. Congress and the government do not want us to have our own because we subsidize theirs. So that's telling you that there's probably a pretty good chance there'd be a better deal out there for us if we did our own. Right? The other thing that Congress really loves is that we pay into Medicare all the time and none of our people pull it out as a whole. So we very much fund that part too. So if we had our own, do I think we could do it cheaper? I actually do. I think there should be a way to take a 500,000 person company and find somebody out there that is willing to give us a reasonable rate. That's that part of it. The second part of it is I look around the room here, I look at my staff, and who wants to insure a bunch of people that are 40, 45, 50 plus, okay? We are not a young company. So from that standpoint, I don't know how much that impacts it. We're actually young compared to a lot of government agencies, but even at that, you can't think that you're going to get the same rate for 500,000 people as if we were a 500,000 company that had our workforce split evenly between 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, etc. Our workforce is very heavily weighted towards that 45 to 55 plus employee. So anybody that looked and would give us a price would have to look at what age are they that they're insuring to. So that's why I say I'm not smart enough to know whether or not what the bottom line is. I can see some real advantages to it, and I can see why Congress doesn't want us not to be part of theirs. But I also see where that some of our projections, if we are projecting based off an average age of a company, our projections could be low too. That we might not save as much as they're projecting. Does that make sense? Oh, I missed that one. That was an HR question. I should have known for something. So I would be smart enough not to answer it. James.
This is possibly an HR question also. You're speaking of deficits, that we're having. And looking at our fuel costs, have they thought about going back to relays and walkouts?
As far as our fuel costs go, the number I always heard before was that for every cent that gas goes up, figure it costs us $8 million as a company on a yearly basis. So that's how big it is. Green routes are something that most districts have looked at. And the question is a green route or a walkout type route, relays, is it more efficient overall expense? You got to look at that versus is there any extra cost? If I've got to spend a couple hours for somebody to go drop the relays, and I'm going to save an hour back, an extra hour I can pay for my fuel. Well, what you could save for is think about if you could take 15 to 20% of your fuel costs away overnight. That's part of where that savings for 6 to 5 days comes from. Because all of a sudden, our carriers that are out 6 days a week are now out 5. Yes.
Since you brought the question about the 65 days vote, has anyone done any research on any other day other than Saturday and have they compared it to what they implemented for loss of market share? Different other days,
When they first looked at 6 to 5, they went to a lot of businesses and a lot of the mailers, okay? Because, they're the ones that really are spending the money. And they all came back with, no. Saturday's the day if you're not going to be there. Okay? So I don't think if we would look at 6 to 5, it would be any day but Saturday. The market share to it is sort of an interesting debate myself, because I listen to the people like the medicines, Netflix, the places that say they are so dependent on Saturday. And they say, well, we would go to another carrier if you guys aren't there on Saturday. Yeah, I go by those brown trucks all the time on Saturday when I'm out. There's not another carrier. Somebody like Netflix might go for a different way and push harder for streaming. you know, they're trying hard. That's, their long-term does not include us to nearly the extent it is, okay? They really see long-term. They want to be electronic. They don't want the expense of having a physical DVD being mailed or the postage, okay? You know, they don't want that. If they had the way to convince everybody to go streaming, they would. So Saturday, I don't know that there's a second alternative. I think mailers would have to adjust their mail habits and say, okay, if I want something that I normally wanted in-house Saturday, how do I get it there Friday to make up for it? Medicines would have to be the same thing. You'd have to adjust that. I would have told you that 2 years ago, I was very much against the idea of going 65-day. I thought that was our market niche. I used to tell marketing people, go out there and tell them that we deliver essentially, what's that, 10 extra weeks a year than any competitor we've got. Think of the advantage we have with that. But when you don't have a choice financially, back to the question, are we doing enough to stay fiscally solid? You got to look at anything you can look at. So even though I like the fact that it was a competitive advantage to us, I would rather see us stay 6-day. If we go to 5, I think it's got to be Saturday. Unless something else breaks free, I don't know how we're going to be able to pay all the bills long-term without doing something big. And that's a big one. That's, you know, that's $3 billion plus. And if they say our numbers are bad and it's only $2.5 billion, well, okay, it's still a bunch of money.
Okay, that puts us up to about the right time. Thank you very much, Jim.
Oh, thank you.
Well, hopefully that's, there's a lot of things that Jim has shared with us that we aren't going to get out of Simon tomorrow because of Jim's operational background. Opinions and exposure to things that are totally different than what most HR can be able to relate to. Although I'm trying to bring Simon around.